Beyond the walls of a royal palace, shrouded in the shadow of grief, where tears are a sign of weakness and love a forbidden fruit, a young princess yearning for a father's love found solace where she should not have. One glance, one careless word, one secret capable of destroying everything. What happens when a princess's heart chooses the wrong person? And what price must be paid for a fleeting moment of forbidden happiness? Discover the story of Princess Helena's first secret love, a love that flared up against all odds. The Shadows of Osborne House. December 1861. Osborne House, once bathed in sunlight and children's laughter, was plunged into darkness. Not only outside, where the biting winter wind from Captivated tormented the bare branches of the trees, but also within its very walls. Mourning draperies, as heavy as grief itself, absorbed the light, transforming spacious rooms into tombs. Prince Albert, the heart of the family, the pillar of the nation, was dead. Princess Helena, 15 years old, almost a child, stood by the tall window of her chambers. Her fragile figure was lost against the backdrop of massive curtains that concealed the dreary gray landscape. "Papa!" The thought throbbed in her head. He called me Lenchen. He let me stain my hands with charcoal over drawings, go down to the engine room of the yacht. He saw in me not just a princess, but an inquisitive child, a little engineer. With his passing, the house fell silent. Now there are only my tears and my mother's coldness. A vivid image flashed in her memory. Her father laughing, showing her some intricate mechanical part, his warm voice saying, "Look, Lenchen, see how this works." A sharp knock on the door made her startle. A lady-in-waiting's voice, respectful but devoid of warmth, announced, "Your Highness, Her Majesty is expecting you." Helena turned slowly. Fear and an already familiar sense of doom flickered in her eyes. Queen Victoria sat at her massive desk, as straight as a statue, cloaked in deep mourning. Her face was impenetrable, as if carved from stone. Helena entered, barely breathing, and stopped at a respectful distance. "Tears again, Helena?" The queen's voice was even, icy, and she did not even raise her eyes from her papers. Helena swallowed the lump rising in her throat but remained silent. Victoria finally lifted her heavy gaze to her. Her eyes were red from sleepless nights, yet dry, alarmingly dry. "You must be strong. I do not tolerate weakness. The weak cry. We do not." Helena bowed her head low, desperately suppressing the sobs ready to burst forth. The coldness of those words seemed to pierce her to the bone. A few days later, a familiar tense silence reigned at the dinner table, broken only by the faint clinking of silverware. The Queen, Helena, her brother Edward, known in the family as Bertie, and her sister Louise were seated. Life, shackled by mourning, continued according to routine, but even in this icy atmosphere, barely perceptible cracks appeared in the usual order. Edward, pushing aside his fork, said with poorly concealed irritation, "Mr. Ruland has made me memorize Schiller again. Endless lines about fate and virtue. Who needs this when all the talk in this house is about death anyway?" Helena involuntarily raised her head. The name Ruland sparked a fleeting, vague interest in her. She remembered him, her father's trusted librarian, a calm, intelligent man with a quiet voice. "Education tempers the mind, Edward," Victoria replied impassively. "Mr. Ruland is doing his duty. He was devoted to your father. You would do well to listen to him." Edward snorted but dared not argue further and glowered at his plate. Helena, too, lowered her gaze, but her mother's words, "devoted to father," resonated in her soul with unexpected warmth. The people who remembered Papa, they seemed the only ones alive in this frozen, mournful world. If you enjoy this story and want to hear more about forgotten destinies and royal intrigues, subscribe. There are many more fascinating stories ahead. Lessons by Candlelight. The winter of 1862 at Osborne was particularly bleak. The damp, salty wind from the sea seemed to penetrate the thick stone walls, filling even the warmest rooms with a chilling dampness. But the library, a repository of her father's books and his unseen spirit, drew Helena in. It always smelled of old leather bindings, beeswax, and slightly dusty paper. Here, under the pretext of reading, she began to spend hours, slipping unnoticed into a far corner with a book in her hands, but in reality, listening to the German lessons Karl Ruland gave her brother. And so it was now. Settled in a deep armchair, she pretended to be engrossed in her reading. At the large oak table by the fireplace, where logs crackled softly, Edward was openly yawning while Karl Ruland, a middle-aged man with intelligent, calm eyes, patiently explained something to him. At one point, Ruland began to read in German, his even, deep voice filling the room. Wer nie sein Brot mit Tränen aß? Wer nie die kummervollen Nachte? Auf seinem Bette weinend saß. Der kennt euch nicht, ihr himmlischen Mächte. He who never ate his bread with tears, he who never, through the sorrowful nights, sat weeping on his bed, he knows you not, ye heavenly powers. Helena froze. These lines by Goethe resonated within her with a deep, incomprehensible melancholy, but also with a strange, almost painful comfort. She raised her eyes to Ruland. Their gazes met for a moment, and in his eyes she saw understanding. Why do Germans love sadness so much? She blurted out softly, almost in a whisper, surprising even herself. Edward turned around impactos. Ruland, however, looked at Helena attentively, and a soft, barely perceptible smile touched his lips. Because there is beauty in it, Your Highness, a depth that cannot be found in superficial joy. Suffering makes us wiser. Helena felt something warm spread through her chest. He understood her. He hadn't dismissed her, hadn't considered her question foolish. Oh, Lenchen has decided to master German wisdom too? Edward drawled mockingly. Perhaps Mr. Ruland will take you as his pupil as well? Look how she's staring at him. Helena flushed to the roots of her hair, but, to her own surprise, did not look away from Ruland. A challenge utpadet in her eyes, and a nascent, as yet unrecognized interest. Perhaps, she answered quietly but firmly. You are too sentimental. The summer of 1862, the family was spending at Windsor Castle. The days flowed by in their established order. But for Helena, the world had subtly changed. The library had become her secret refuge, and the German lessons Ruland continued to give Edward a welcome pretext. She no longer hid in the corner but sat a little closer, and though she tried to conceal her feelings, her eyes shone treacherously every time she looked at Karl Ruland. He behaved with impeccable professionalism, but sometimes when Edward was distracted or left early, their gazes would meet, long, full of unspoken things. In those moments, the silence in the vast library became almost palpable, filled only with the beating of her heart. One day, Louise, her younger sister, lively, observant, and not always tactful, burst into Helena's chambers like a whirlwind. At your books again, Lenchen? She drawled mockingly. Or is it not the books that draw you to the library so? You spend all your time there. Is our stern Mr. Ruland truly so irresistible? Do you think he's noticed you? Helena flushed so violently that the book fell from her hands. Don't be ridiculous, Louise! Oh, so I'm right. Louise gifted her a sly smile. His seriousness? His eyes? Admit it, Lenchen. Helena turned away, trying to hide her embarrassment, but her sister's words had struck a chord. Do you think he's noticed you? The question, like a persistent fly, echoed in her head, mixing sweet hope with bitter fear. Soon, Queen Victoria also noticed the change in her daughter. One day, as Helena was distractedly sorting through papers in her study, Victoria looked at her attentively. You have changed, Helena. Her voice was dry, perceptive. You are distracted. Your head is in the clouds. What occupies your thoughts? Helena started, her heart freezing with alarm. Nothing, Mama, she mumbled, lowering her eyes. Just tiredness. The Queen was silent for a long time, her piercing gaze seeming to bore right through Helena. Then she slowly shifted her eyes to the portrait of Albert that stood on the desk, and in her voice, when she spoke, there was not only steel, but also a kind of dull, old pain. Remember one thing, Helena. In this world, for people like us, nothing depends solely on ourselves. Your feelings, your desires." She faltered for a moment, as if remembering something of her own. "They will always be weighed on the scales of duty. Duty to the name you bear, to the memory of your father, to the future of this country. And this duty, it is heavy. Do not dare to forget this, if you do not wish to be broken by its weight." The queen's words fell upon Helena like an icy shower. She felt an invisible ring tightening Vokrug her, ever more constricting. Moments that will never return. One evening, as the crimson rays of sunset painted the walls of the Osborne House library in warm tones, Helena sat in a deep armchair. The book lay closed in her lap. Her thoughts were heavy, and she simply watched the quiet flame of the candles. Carl Ruland stood by a bookshelf, silently observing her. "Is something troubling you, princess?" he asked softly. "You seem particularly sad today." Helena slowly raised her eyes to him. In them was not only melancholy, but also a kind of desperate resolve. I don't want to be just someone's daughter," she blurted out quietly, her voice trembling. "An appendage to a title. I want to feel, to live." Ruland moved closer. His gaze was full of deep sympathy and such tenderness that Helena's breath caught. "You are more than just a princess, Helena. There is so much light, intelligence, depth in you." He gently took her hand. Helena did not pull away. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt as if it would leap out of her chest. "You deserve to be loved." His voice was proniknoveni. He looked directly into her eyes. "Not because you are of royal blood, but because you are Helena, intelligent, sensitive, real." Helena's eyes filled with tears. This time not from sorrow, but from the sharp, piercing happiness that overwhelmed her. She looked at him with silent adoration. The entire world had narrowed to this moment, to his voice, his gaze, the warmth of his hand. Suddenly a shadow flickered in the library doorway. It was Louise. She froze upon seeing them, her eyes wide with surprise, and then a familiar mischievous yet slightly malicious glint patted in them. "Oh," she drawled with feigned innocence. "Forgive me for interrupting such a touching scene." Helena and Ruland abruptly pulled apart. Helena's face was flooded with the burning color of shame and horror. Ruland paled but tried to maintain his composure. "Louise!" Helena called out sharply. "What are you doing here?" "Mama is waiting for you, Lenchen," Louise smiled too sweetly. "Urgently. It seems some rumors have reached her." She cast another long, searching glance at them and, clearly satisfied with the effect she had produced, slipped out of the room as lightly as a butterfly. Helena watched her go with a soul-chilling despair. It was over. This moment, this short, stolen instant of happiness would cost too much. The sentences passed. In Queen Victoria's study, the ticking of the massive clock on the mantelpiece measured out heavy seconds. The Queen sat at her desk, straight and still, like a judge delivering a sentence. Carl Ruland stood before her. He was pale but held himself with dignity. "You have abused my trust, Mr. Ruland." Victoria's voice was quiet, but each syllable sounded like the blow of a hammer. "And the trust of my late husband. Your task was to teach my son. Instead, you allowed yourself an unacceptable liberty with my daughter." "Your Majesty, Princess Helena is an intelligent and sensitive young woman. If I have caused her any harm—" "You have harmed the honor of my family," Victoria interrupted him, waving her hand imperiously. "You have blinded her with sentimental illusions. I will rid her of them. You are leaving England. Today, your service at court is over." Ruland silently bowed his head. There was pain in his eyes, but also a bitter acceptance of the inevitable. He turned and left. A moment later, Helena entered the study. She was trembling all over, but desperately tried to stand straight. "You have disappointed me, Helena," Victoria said without even looking at her, continuing to shuffle papers on her desk. "Deeply." Helena swallowed with difficulty. The Queen finally raised her cold, appraising gaze to her. "You were never a beauty, like your sisters. I knew that. But I thought you were intelligent. It turns out you are just a sentimental fool shui gadu an daan ishiao shuo. Her mother's words struck Helena like slaps. She clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. "Mama," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You should be grateful that I am saving you from disgrace, to fall in love with a mere librarian, a queen's daughter." He is not just," Helena cried out in despair. Let me at least say goodbye to him, I beg you." "No," Victoria cut her off in an icy tone. One word, final, like a sentence. "But why? Why such cruelty?" Helena whispered, feeling the ground give way beneath her. Victoria rose, walked right up to her, and looked down at her with her heavy, unblinking gaze. "Because you are my daughter, and your life belongs to the crown, not to your foolish feelings. He leaves in an hour. You will never see him again. Get used to it. Now go." Helena, staggering as if blind, left the study. The tears she had held back for so long now streamed down her cheeks like a torrent. The letter that will never be sent. An hour. Just 1 hour separated her from a last look, a last word. But even that was denied her. Standing by the window of her bedroom, her face wet with tears, Helena watched as, down in the courtyard, Karl Ruland got into a carriage. He never once raised his head. The carriage moved off, and its dull rumble on the gravel echoed in Helena's heart like a funeral knell. Soon it disappeared into the gathering dusk. Helena slowly sank onto a chair. In her cold hands was a crumpled piece of paper, a letter she had written to him that night, full of desperate, unspoken words. "Karl." The lines echoed in her head. "I do not know why I write. Everything I wish to say can no longer be said. You were my light. You made me feel alive. Perhaps I shall never feel this way again." And then, like a merciless brand, her mother's cold, imperious voice replayed in her memory. "In a week, you will go to London. It is time to find you a husband. I have already chosen a worthy match." Helena looked at the letter, her face contorted with unbearable pain. "Even this," she thought with bitterness, "even feeling, they have taken from me." She walked to the fireplace where embers still glowed. Slowly, as if performing a sacred ritual, she held the letter to the fire. The paper instantly flared up, greedily consuming the inked lines. Helena stared at the flames with unseeing eyes until the last words of her unsaid farewell turned into a handful of gray ash. Resignation or escape within. Several months later, in the vast, brightly lit ballroom of Buckingham Palace, music blared, laughter echoed, and the hum of hundreds of voices filled the air. Another lavish reception was underway. Helena, impeccably dressed, a fixed, polite smile on her lips, sat beside her mother. Queen Victoria was animatedly conversing with some important dignitary. "Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein is a worthy man," Helena clearly heard her mother's voice. "Well-balanced, sensible, just what is needed for a marriage. Helena will be happy with him. I have so decided." Helena stared straight ahead but saw nothing. The music and voices merged into an indistinct, oppressive drone. In her mind, like an obsession, another voice sounded. Karl Ruland's warm, soft, unforgettable voice. "You deserve to be loved not because you are a princess, but because you are Helena." Helena flinched almost imperceptibly. The same impeccable, empty smile remained on her lips. Her gaze, fixed on nothing, was full of unutterable longing. "Yes," she thought with quiet, bitter resignation, "deserving, but perhaps not I." Princess Helena was married to Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein. Her life, as her mother had foretold, henceforth and forever belonged to duty. She tried not to think of Karl Ruland, but sometimes, in the deep silence of the night, when no one could see her tears, she still heard his voice, speaking of the beauty of sorrow. This story is inspired by real events but includes elements of artistic fiction. Up next, you will see a list of historical facts that formed its foundation. If you enjoy experiencing history through storytelling, make sure to subscribe. Many more fascinating tales await.